Yes, you are. There you are. Hi, how are you, Clarissa? Thank you so much for joining us.
Having me on. I'm so excited to be able to chat. I was a little worried about the internet situation, but it seems
Now, where are you? You look kind of like you're in a closet or
I am in
something.
my hotel room in a city called Dnipro, which is sort of towards the east, but still kind of in the middle of Ukraine. And we drove here from Kiev today.
And what is that like where you are? Can you bring us up to date on what's going on where you are right now and what we should be aware of?
So basically,
kind of overall?
Right now, all eyes are on the eastern part of the country because the expectation is that the Russians are going to initiate a major offensive there. They failed in their offensive in the north, right above Kiev. You know, at one stage they were trying to take the capital. While we were there, that failed.
Right.
And so now they really need a victory. And I think they're hoping they can get that victory in the eastern part of the country. And so that's why we've started to head in that direction. And it hasn't started yet, like in earnest. There's a lot of shelling and a lot of people being evacuated and a lot of people dying. But we haven't seen the kind of major offensive with huge bombardment get underway yet. So I think people are just bracing themselves.
When you say we haven't seen this huge bombardment, you're hearing like we're going to, from the Russians, we're going to be harder than ever before. We're going to dig down more than we ever had. We're really going to make a statement this time. Is that what you're hearing?
The lines, that's what people expect. I think the failure of the offensive in the north, the fact that they not only were not able to take Kiev, they weren't even able to take a different city called Chernihiv, which is north of Kiev. It's 300,000 people. I think they really expected that they would be able to take that. It's close to the border with Belarus, which is, you know, basically an extension of Russia at this stage. And so they really need to try to eke out a victory in the east. I don't think it's going to be that easy for them, in part because they have to bring a lot of those troops who were part of that northern offensive all the way back into Russia and all the way around again and redeploy them in the east. And those troops are exhausted, they're demoralized, a lot of them are injured. Their kit has been badly damaged. So and you know, the Ukrainian military is waiting for it and is ready for it. But it feels like for Russia, there's a lot riding on this moment.
So you said that the Russians demoralized, exhausted. How are the Ukrainians right now?
I have been consistently astonished by the Ukrainians. Their resilience, their courage, and you know, really, that's not a platitude. I mean it very sincerely. In the beginning of the war, when I was in Kiev, U.S. officials were saying they expected the capital to fall in 2 or 3 days. Not only did the capital not fall, Ukrainian forces were able to beat the Russians back and force them into a retreat. And, you know, I just went to this little village that was completely occupied by the Russians for 5 weeks. They were executing people. They were detaining people. One woman is still looking for her daughter. She's been missing now for several weeks. She has no idea where she is. They ransacked the place. They looted it. And this woman took me into her home that had been completely, you know, just looted and robbed by the Russians. And she showed me a Ukrainian flag that she had been hiding for all that time while the Russians were there. And that to me really spoke to such courage. It's this like very small, quiet act of great bravery and resistance to have Russian forces basically living in your home and you're hiding the Ukrainian flag.
It gives me goosebumps when you tell that story. You've covered so many wars over your career. What is it about this one that's different, that people seem more fascinated with it? But what is it like kind of on the ground? And why do you think that is, that it's gotten so much more attention?
First of all, you know, this is an invasion. This is a full-scale invasion of a sovereign nation that has genuinely done nothing to deserve this invasion, to the point where, even people I know in Russia who support President Putin, they never really thought this was going to happen. Nobody believed this was going to happen because it didn't make sense and because it seemed sort of outrageous. So I think firstly, there's like that component to it. I think obviously the fact that you are seeing so many civilians being targeted. You're seeing maternity hospitals getting hit. You're seeing, horrendous signs of extrajudicial killings and executions and rape and, relentless bombardment in civilian areas or people being targeted. I mean, every conflict, Maria, is heartbreaking and is devastating and is full of tragedy. But I think the reason so many people are captivated by this is that it really does seem like such a David and Goliath type of battle.
Yeah. It's so much that the way you just executions, maternity hospitals targeted, preschools. It seems inconceivable that in 2022, this is happening, and it's happening kind of in real time. We're watching it happen. What is it like to actually be there?
Yeah.
You're there. And I talk to people all the time here who say, I can't go on with my daily life because I'm watching this and I can't seem to kind of be able to compartmentalize it and go on with my life. And I'm like, imagine Clarissa, she's there. What is that like?
So I would say that when
there.
you're like on the ground here and covering the story, you do have to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
You can't really let yourself go there. Because you won't be able to pick yourself up again, probably. So when you're in the field and you're on the front line and you're in dangerous places, you are just trying to stay ruthlessly focused on doing your job, doing it to the best of your ability, and trying to keep your crew safe and figure out the most sensible and secure way of getting the job done. When you go home afterwards, that's the time where I think it's really important to sit with it and let it kind of come to the surface. Often it's like baked into your bones, the sort of stress and trauma of covering conflict and of spending all your time with people who have borne witness to significant trauma. And that's when you need to really make sure that you are being vigilant about self-care and letting yourself feel the feelings, honestly. And because you can't really do that when you're on the ground, you have to just try to soldier on. I sometimes compare it to being like an ER surgeon, a trauma surgeon. Not that we're saving lives, because we're not, but you're surrounded often by chaos and it's very stressful. And you just can't focus too much on letting yourself be totally open to all the heartache. You are present in the moment for people when they share their trauma and their stories with you, but you do have some kind of a barrier there. And you just have to think about, how can I get all this material and put together a story that is going to do justice to the experience of these people.
But when you say then you go home, because you have gone home, right? And you have 2 little children at home. And then you have to be there, and then you have to leave and go back again, which you have just done.
That's really hard. That's really hard, because it's, you're shifting between these like radically different spaces. And so, when you're home, you're first of all letting yourself try to unpack a lot of what you've been through. You're also, I don't know, I'm sure it's the same for you. Like the minute I'm with my kids, it doesn't matter what kind of a terrible mood I'm in or what, you're just opened up, right? Like your heart is just out there.
Yeah.
And so you are in a much more vulnerable, sensitive, tender space. And so then it is hard when you have to kind of metaphorically put your armor back on and kind of close the door on that space a little bit and leave your children, which is like, it's just the worst feeling. It's much harder for me than it is for them, by the way. They're just like, oh, mom's gone, she's bye. They're still little enough that I'm lucky in that sense.
Right.
But I believe in the work that we're doing here. And I think it's really important that journalists do keep covering this story, even as the war continues to grind on.
Let's talk, I want to talk to you about that, about, you know, leaving, coming back there. Is this something, Clarissa, that you feel like I've got to be there? This is my calling. This is my mission. I can't not be there. Is it something in a way maybe you don't even understand
1,000%.
yourself?
And it's one of the hardest
really?
things, again, like people don't tend to talk about this, but one of the hardest things about going home is that, like, even though you're so happy to be with your loved ones and eating good meals and having a bath and getting some rest, part of you is really struggling with the feelings of wanting to be back out in the field, the feelings of guilt, like, how come I get to leave? Why do I get to come home to this beautiful life and other people are having their lives shattered? And could I be doing more? And should I be doing more? And, oh, did you see this story? And often, you know, I work with the same team the whole time. We'll be talking to each other when we're at home. Like, did you see what this person did? And oh my gosh, that story was so amazing. And wow, why didn't we try to, you know, so it is really hard to try to switch off and be fully present for your family and for your friends. And I think I'm getting better at it, but like honestly, it's about, part of it is just like you gotta let your sort of spirit and your emotions catch up with your body. Your body moves out of the war zone really quickly, right? It takes 1 day or 2 days. But like your heart and your mind, they're a little slower to catch up. And so that's why it's so important. You have to like force yourself to do it. You have to sit.
But when you're there on the ground, this is something that you want the world to know. You want to tell this story. What is the story you want to be telling today?
I want to be telling, and the story that motivates me in every conflict zone and crisis that I have ever covered, is the story of ordinary people. Ordinary people who are living through acts of unspeakable evil, who are experiencing the worst of mankind, the greatest of heartache and trauma, and who I believe deserve to have their stories told, deserve to have their trauma on the record. And so what I want to do is I want to like make these people real for you. And I want you to be able to connect with them. And maybe you've never been to Ukraine, and maybe you don't speak Ukrainian, and maybe you don't have that strong, you know, it's not like, oh, I've been to Italy, I love spaghetti, and Florence is beautiful, and let's go to the Uffizi, right? This might feel a little more abstract. My job as a storyteller is to make you feel deeply and profoundly connected to the lives of ordinary people that are being shattered by acts that are beyond their control. And that's what got me started in this industry, and that's what keeps me going.
So when we talk about lives being shattered, the woman you were talking about, the refugees that we see leaving, that we saw you helping a woman and switching into a completely different language in real time, isn't it that the world has no clue about the trauma, the aftermath, the ongoing, this has been going for 6 weeks, but this is going to be going for years in people's bodies, in their hearts, in their minds. Can these people really rebuild?
I think
Do you get that sense?
Rebuild, but I think it's too early to start thinking about rebuilding because, you know, for President Putin, this has become kind of like an existential issue for him. He needs to be able to salvage some semblance of a victory out of this in order for him to walk away.
Right.
And the issue you have right now is that the Ukrainians have actually really been kicking some serious ass. And I think they think that they can maybe win this. And maybe they can. But the issue becomes, you always in any war will see this, like you still have to find an off-ramp for your enemy. So if you're President Zelensky right now, yes, you're thinking you want to win this, but you're also thinking somewhere in the back of your mind, I have to give Putin something that he will. Well, I mean,
what is that?
It's a really tough call. I mean, there's lots of things that people put on the table. Do you give them these breakaway republics, the so-called Donbass region, which is really the focus of this Eastern offensive? Do you put down on paper that you're never going to join NATO, for example, which of course has been President Putin's kind of number one bugaboo?
Yeah.
There are a number of like complicating factors there, though, which is that, President Zelensky suddenly makes a lot of concessions to President Putin. Then there are many people in Ukraine who might say, hold on a second, we didn't authorize you to do that. We didn't fight for that. We didn't die for that. So he's kind of walking a tightrope, right, between wanting to satisfy the needs of his people and like defend their sacrifice and their courage, but also politically trying to find a way to de-escalate.
Do you think he's able to do that? It seems the longer this goes on, the more complicated it becomes for both
there's like
men,
one
in a
other
way.
scenario that could play out here, which is that it becomes a war of attrition, right? It's a war that will just grind on for weeks, for months, potentially even years. And that, the hope would be that you would sort of, if you're President Zelensky, you would slowly bleed the Russians dry. And the problem with that is you're probably going to bleed Ukraine dry as well. I mean, Ukraine's economy is going to contract enormously. I mean, this is going to be a Herculean sort of Marshall Plan that will need to be put into effect at the end of this to rebuild Ukraine. So there are external powers who maybe would sort of favor that kind of an option where it doesn't escalate too much further, but that it keeps going on and that, that basically President Putin will be seriously depleted as a result.
If this keeps going on, how difficult is it as a journalist to keep the eyes of the world on this story? Like, we're 6 weeks in. For the first week, it was, everybody 24/7. They were like saying, oh my God, is Zelensky going to live another day? Are they going to take Kiev? And now like it's still going on, and oh my God. And as you and I both know, people lose interest really quickly in stories. And Zelensky has been a master, in my humble opinion, of keeping us focused on this story. But how much longer do you think he can do that, or that you can do that? And
I'm not going to lie, on the ground. You can already feel it. There is a shift already. I mean, we're still covering it morning, noon, and night, and that's important because it needs to be covered. But you can feel that the public is starting to reach a saturation point, maybe, in terms of how much more of it they can absorb. And I think there will be, in any conflict, these sort of natural points where there are lulls, and then something terrible or significant happens and people tune in again, and then there's another lull. And so it is tough as a journalist because it doesn't become any less agonizing on the ground. It doesn't become any less important geopolitically. And so your challenge as a storyteller is, how can I keep making this vivid and making it real and making it compelling? How can I keep that bridge open that allows you to connect with the people who are experiencing this? And it's a challenge. It's not easy at all. And sometimes it's heartbreaking because you'll do a beautiful piece and it won't get that same kind of response that maybe it did at the beginning of the conflict. And you just have to take a deep breath and keep going, because at the end of the day, you can't do this work for the plaudits and for the response. You do it because, in a sense, you're documenting history, and you're building, along with all the other incredible journalists covering the story, you're building like a case file on what went down. And
you're building, as you said, the stories of ordinary people. That's why you're doing it. You would do it, I believe, if no one was watching, you would be. Do you get scared, Clarissa? Are you scared?
I do. I mean, I'm not scared right now because I'm in a comfortable hotel and it's far enough away from the front line but at the beginning of the war, I mean, it was petrifying, Maria, because none of us knew what was going to happen. We knew that Kiev, which we originally thought probably wouldn't be targeted, was being hit with missiles, and that Russian troops were trying to encircle it, and they were relentlessly bombarding the suburbs, and people were talking about all the potential weapons that could be used. And fear is a really important thing. If you don't feel fear, you're stupid, honestly. Like there's a very good evolutionary reason that we feel fear, and it helps instruct our actions. When you do this work, however, it's not that you don't feel fear, you still feel it. It's that you learn to discipline your rational mind to take the lead and don't let fear take the lead in decisions. So you feel the fear,
How do you do
practice,
that? How do you do that?
practice. Because I remember covering, Aleppo in 2012, and I was so frightened, I almost couldn't function. I almost sort of shut down, and I just could barely do my job. It was so intensely all-consuming, the fear. And now I understand that, first of all, I won't put myself in a situation where I feel like I don't have a good chance of getting out of it. I'm very mindful about being incredibly cautious in how I approach risk, especially since I had kids. It's not just about me. But secondly, I will know, because fear is also, it plays with your mind, right? Fear will be like, oh, this could happen, and then that could happen, and then this could happen, and then that could happen. And you could just, before you know it, you're like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And that's when the rational mind has to be like, okay, hello, fear. I'm just going to just be quiet for a second. Let's go over the plan. Where are the shells falling? How far away are they? What are other people doing? Are there other cars on the road? Do I need to take cover? Do I have my body armor? Are we all standing together? And you just have to be disciplined about going through your checkpoints, making sure that you might be in a situation which is uncomfortable, but that you are staying calm and very much aware of your surroundings and laser focused on looking out for your security, getting what you need to get, and then getting out.
I love that, because the way you said this is not something like my daughter, who's a huge fan of yours. It sounds funny to say fan, but she's like that woman. I mean,
Oh
she
no,
probably
I'm
never
afraid all the
afraid.
time.
And so I think you're honest. You're, but I think kind of being able to manage that, and what we're seeing is ordinary people,
Yeah.
Ukrainians, who are afraid but
Yeah.
acting anyway,
And
right?
you really
You
see the
see these.
difference as well. At the beginning of the war, you saw people just paralyzed by fear and shock. And then there is something that kicks in. You, as a human being, quickly adapt to any situation, even a horrifying situation, even a very frightening situation. But this is also when you have to be careful, Maria, because the analogy of the frog, right? If you drop a frog in boiling water, it's going to jump right out of the water, right? But if you put a frog in some water and then slowly turn up the heat, sometimes the frog will just stay in the water until it's boiling without even realizing it. And the same goes for people in war zones. It is possible for this particularly happens with like aid workers and journalists, where you will be in the war zones for such a long time that you become a little bit desensitized to the risks. You become a little more cavalier in your decision making. And I've seen this happen time and time again. And that's again why it's so important. A, to have good colleagues and editors and managers back home who say, hell no, you're not doing that. You got great stuff already. Go back to your base, which is relatively safe, and just file. And it's also really important for you to be self-aware enough that every however many weeks it might be before you need a break, say, I'm now going to take myself out of this situation, and I'm going to sleep for a week. I'm going to have a long chat with my therapist. I'm going to have a bath. I'm going to hug my kids. I'm going to go out dancing. Whatever it is that does it for you, I'm going to replenish and refill. Because when you're running on empty in a conflict zone, you're much more likely to make mistakes.
Clarissa, finally, who inspires you to
Oh
stay
my
at
gosh.
this?
I mean, honestly, it might sound trite, but like the people who really inspire me are the women and mothers and grandmothers that I'm seeing in Ukraine day in and day out, looking after their children, staying to protect their homes, living under bombardment, pretending to their kids that it's some kind of a game so they won't be frightened. The courage and the grace and the resilience that takes, like honestly, it just I find it profoundly humbling and deeply inspiring.
You gave me goosebumps. Clarissa, I know you're busy. I want to thank you so much for bringing this really into our hearts and bringing kind of what it's like to cover this into reality. You know, we can watch you and wonder, but I appreciate so much your brilliance, not only as a journalist, but also to just tell us, like, this is scary. But I want to tell these stories of ordinary people and what that is like. And there, but for the grace of God, go all of us, right? And I think that's what's so kind of, I think, stunning about this story is people who had these lives, right? And then in an instant, they're all blown up. It just vanished. And we're watching it in real time. And the misinformation, that's a whole other story that's captivated so many people about ordinary Russians and what they're thinking and what they think is going on. And we see these worlds kind of colliding in real time in terms of journalism, in terms of storytelling, in terms of truth. What is true? And I think what you have told us here today is it's true, it's scary to do this, but it's so important to do this because we wouldn't know this story if it weren't for people like you, journalists like you that are there telling it to us.
Well, thank you
in real
so
time.
much, Maria. I've really, really loved chatting with you. And the weather looks much nicer where you are.
Thank you, and I hope
It's
we'll do it
lovely and
again.
sunny there.
Yes, it is. I know. I feel kind of bad, but it is. But I think this is the thing, you know, kind of, I have so many people are like, I want to stay focused, but I want to live my life. And you're saying the same thing, right? You want to do your job. It's a call,
and
but you have another world
like,
that also.
I always think it's really important to try to keep that balance. Like, you have to, you know, sometimes I think when we're at home, we feel so guilty. Oh, I get to live this great life and I should be more focused. You know, live your life, enjoy your life, embrace your blessings, be thankful for it, but also be engaged and be self-aware and understand that with that privilege does come some responsibility, just to at least be attuned to the sort of experiences of others. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy your life, and you know, I think all of us feel that kind of push-pull all the time, but okay.
Clarissa, go to bed, stay safe, and I hope you'll continue. I'd love to continue this
Me too.
conversation. It would be
All right,
terrific.
take
Thank you
care.
so much
Bye.
for taking time.